Nobody could believe what they were seeing. On June 17, 2025, the White House released a series of photos from what appeared to be an informal Oval Office meeting with a European sports delegation. The thumbnails were barely noticed until someone zoomed in on one of them. There, seated in the front row of the West Wing's most iconic room, were players and staff of Juventus Football Club wearing their black and white jerseys. And standing at the resolute desk, not behind it, was Donald Trump, speaking passionately, folder in hand, as if delivering a classified briefing. But it wasn't the oddity of the soccer setting in the Oval Office that triggered a storm online. It was who sat silently beside Trump. Igor Tudor. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even pretending to play diplomat. His arms were crossed, his brow furrowed, and his eyes locked on Trump, like a man trying not to blink during a countdown. By 3 p.m. that day, the image had been reposted over 1 million times. Reddit threads titled, "Why is Juventus in the White House? Is Trump forming a football alliance?" and New World Order, Serie A edition exploded. Most assumed it was another Trump PR stunt, maybe a sponsorship deal, or an awkward attempt at boosting support in Europe. But investigative journalists knew better. The real question wasn't why Juventus was in the room. The question was, what was in the red folder on Trump's desk? 6 months earlier, Trump had been relatively quiet, too quiet, according to insiders. Despite constant media appearances and Truth Social rants, he had canceled several major political events and was notably absent from international affairs circles. Many speculated health issues. Others whispered of legal battles. But the truth was far stranger. Trump had been traveling, not to campaign, but to meet with select figures in sports, media, and geopolitics. The stops were quiet: Zagreb, Milan, Doha, and finally Turin. Every one of those cities had one name in common across the manifests: Igor Tudor. To the outside world, Tudor was simply Juventus head coach, a disciplined Croatian strategist, known more for his temper than his politics. But beneath that hard shell was a man deeply familiar with regional tensions, propaganda warfare, and the strange dance between power and narrative. He had lived through the fall of Yugoslavia. He had seen governments rise and fall based on perception alone. Trump, who had been following Tudor since 2022, saw more than a coach. He saw a storyteller. It was at a private gala in Doha, under the guise of a football diplomacy dinner, that Trump and Tudor had their first real conversation. Witnesses say they spoke for hours while ignoring every other guest. Their conversation was guarded, but something clicked. Trump spoke of reclaiming narrative territory in global sports. Tudor, to the surprise of many, agreed. What they crafted next was no ordinary partnership. The plan, codenamed Silent Pivot, was bold. According to leaked documents later obtained by a whistleblower from within FIFA's Zurich office, Trump and Tudor had proposed a non-governmental international sports alliance. On paper, it was branded as a neutral federation to restore sporting values, pushing back against UEFA and FIFA's increasingly political messaging campaigns. But buried in the proposal's annex was something far more provocative: content partnerships with global sports brands to test decentralized political messaging within stadium environments. Phase 1 target: Juventus. Yes, Trump was using football and Juventus to quietly test a theory he had harbored for years. What if stadiums could be used to distribute ideology faster than any television network? And Igor Tudor wasn't just aware, he was in on it. The Oval Office meeting was not a coincidence. It was the first public breadcrumb. Unlisted on the official schedule, the meeting was hidden under the vague title, Cultural Exchange, Private. No U.S. soccer representatives were present. No State Department staff. Not even FIFA officials. Just Trump, Tudor, the Juventus delegation, and a locked red folder on the desk containing documents no one has yet been able to confirm or deny. Some say it included financial transfer plans from a Middle Eastern sovereign fund. Others claim it held a signed letter from a former FIFA executive endorsing Trump's new federation. But perhaps the most alarming theory came from a former Juventus PR consultant who tweeted, then deleted, this cryptic message: "You're looking at a handshake between sport and propaganda." and they've already picked their stadiums. And then came the connection no one expected. The day before the Oval Office meeting, Tudor was spotted entering the Qatari embassy in Washington, alone, no club gear, no assistance. Inside sources claim he handed over a sealed packet addressed to the emir himself. The emir is known to own large shares in multiple European sports franchises, including, as of May 2025, partial silent shares in Juventus. Was this the real reason for the Oval Office photo? Was Juventus now a platform, a testing ground, for something that had nothing to do with football? And if so, why was the world only finding out now? The morning after the now infamous Oval Office meeting, an emergency session was held at FIFA headquarters in Zurich. No press releases were issued. No cameras were allowed. The only clue the public got was a suspiciously vague tweet from FIFA's official account. Sport must remain neutral. Period. But inside the glass walls of FIFA's elite circle, chaos reigned. Emails had been pouring in from European football federations, human rights observers, and, most curiously, 3 members of the United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. All of them demanded the same thing. What is going on between FIFA, Donald Trump, and Juventus Football Club? Gianni Infantino, FIFA's president, sat at the head of the conference room table, visibly agitated. The documents in his hands included a full transcript of the Oval Office meeting, audio that had not been authorized for recording. Someone had leaked it. And in that recording, Trump made things perfectly clear. This isn't about football. This is about truth. People need an escape from the propaganda. Sports are the new frontier for free speech. Igor Tudor had remained mostly silent during the meeting, but his approving nods were evident. In one moment, he leaned in and muttered something picked up faintly by the mic. Stadiums are modern-day parliaments. The impact was immediate. By midday, UEFA had issued a formal statement denouncing any effort to politicize European football. But the damage was done. Screenshots of internal FIFA memos marked classified were already circulating on encrypted Telegram channels. One document, dated February 2025, detailed a proposed pilot event to take place in Turin. The event was to feature a Juventus match where political symbols, carefully crafted but disguised as fan slogans, would be displayed in the stands. The initiative was described as a nonverbal political resonance campaign. And according to the memo, Trump had personally approved the phrase, "Take back the game." Back in Italy, the Juventus front office was split. Club CEO Maurizio Arrivabene, who had previously downplayed Trump's interest in football as a publicity stunt, was now facing backlash from fans, sponsors, and board members. During a secret board meeting in Milan, he confronted Tudor. "You didn't tell us the whole truth, Igor. Why was Trump in the Oval Office with our squad?" Tudor responded coldly, "Because sometimes football needs to do more than just entertain. It needs to protect the culture it came from." The room went silent. Meanwhile, media coverage of the incident reached fever pitch. CNN ran a segment titled, "Football as a Weapon. Is Trump hijacking Europe's game?" While Fox News spun it as, "Trump teams up with Juventus to free speech in sport." But it wasn't until a former FIFA compliance officer named Luke Raymond came forward that the story took an explosive turn. Raymond had served in FIFA's ethics division before abruptly resigning in March 2025. Now, in an exclusive interview with Le Monde, he revealed the existence of a shadow memorandum, a document co-authored by Trump's campaign lawyer and an unnamed FIFA board member. The memo outlines a plan to create a parallel governing body within international football. It wouldn't replace FIFA or UEFA immediately, but it would serve as an ideological counterweight, slowly siphoning influence through key clubs. Juventus was meant to be the first domino. Raymond also confirmed that Qatar's sovereign wealth fund had been funneling money into Juventus through layered sponsorship deals, some of which bypassed UEFA's financial fair play regulations by exploiting loopholes in youth development clauses. All of this painted a much darker picture than anyone had anticipated. Trump and Tudor weren't just engaging in a thought experiment. They were building a machine. In response, FIFA issued internal subpoenas to several of its own board members. A preliminary ethics investigation was launched into Juventus. But Tudor remained defiant. In a rare press conference before a Serie A match, he addressed the rumors head-on. Football doesn't exist in a vacuum. If we're not asking who controls the narratives inside stadiums, then we're just sheep. I won't apologize for wanting this sport to mean something again. When asked if he regretted aligning with Donald Trump, Tudor simply smiled. I regret that it had to be him. But no one else had the guts. The White House, now fully swept up in a media firestorm, remained characteristically defiant. In a nationally televised statement, Trump addressed the controversy. The fake news wants you to believe I'm starting a football coup. That's a lie. I love football. But what I love more is the idea that people should be free to speak, cheer, and protest without being told what banners to wave or which songs to sing. That's what this is about. He held up a Juventus jersey. And yes, I like the stripes. They're bold. Like me. The speech sent shockwaves across Europe. In response, the European Commission requested a formal briefing from FIFA. The Italian Prime Minister, caught between defending the country's most prestigious football club and avoiding diplomatic fallout, asked for a closed-door session with Trump's advisors. Meanwhile, Juventus supporters were split. Some rallied behind Tudor's vision, calling him the philosopher coach. Others boycotted games, claiming the club had become a pawn in a foreign political scheme. And still, the red folder from the Oval Office remained missing from all official records. Rumors swirled that it contained a list of pre-cleared clubs across Europe willing to participate in future ideological neutrality experiments. Clubs from Hungary, Serbia, and even the Netherlands were named in speculative articles. By the end of June, FIFA suspended Juventus from all European competitions pending the investigation. Sponsors began pulling out. UEFA threatened to expel them permanently if connections to Trump's initiative were proven. But Tudor didn't flinch. In a leaked locker room speech before their final allowed domestic match, he told his players, "History doesn't remember the comfortable. It remembers the courageous. Today, we play not just for points. We play to remind the world what sport is supposed to be." The players walked out wearing all-black kits. No logos, no slogans, just a single-stitched phrase across the chest. Take back the game. The image of the team walking out in silence, wearing unbranded black, became iconic. It was shared by activists, politicians, even artists. And for the first time, the world began asking itself, was Tudor right all along? Or had Trump simply found the perfect puppet? The meeting that was never about football. June 18th, 2025, a day after the Oval Office press conference, headlines across the world read, "Trump hosts Juventus in the midst of Middle East chaos." But those headlines only told part of the story. What the public didn't know, and what only came to light through anonymous leaks and intercepted diplomatic messages, was that the Juventus visit was never intended as a football tribute. It was a choreographed cover, a diplomatic illusion cloaked in the aesthetics of sports unity. Behind the smiling photo ops, behind Tudor's tight-lipped smile and Trump's booming declarations of global harmony, something else had occurred. A private meeting, no press, no cameras, had taken place just 2 hours before the public event. Attendees included Trump, Igor Tudor, 2 high-level FIFA delegates, and a special advisor from a neutral Gulf state. That advisor, unnamed in official logs, had direct ties to Israeli and Iranian back-channel negotiators. What were they discussing? A framework, one that would use football as a neutralizing influence, not through symbolic gestures or vague campaigns, but through data-driven interventions, political sentiment mapping, and influence infrastructure. It was a plan to turn major football clubs, like Juventus, into temporary narrative bridges across hostile regions. Not permanent peacekeepers, just temporary distractions that could cool down hot zones long enough for new diplomatic fronts to open. And Trump had seen it all coming. Donald Trump, long removed from office but never far from power, had been monitoring the Iran-Israel situation through private security networks and diplomatic surrogates. What he noticed, according to leaked documents, was a disturbing pattern. Military buildup and media hysteria were peaking simultaneously, but both sides were showing signs of hesitation. They didn't want war. They wanted leverage. Trump knew that leverage could be manufactured if public perception shifted just enough. Not dramatically, just slightly. Enough to signal that a shared cultural moment was possible between enemies. That's when he turned to Igor Tudor. Tudor, a coach who had risen fast and quietly, was known for his intellectual approach to the game. But more importantly, he had earned respect across diverse ideological lines. In locker rooms, press rooms, and behind closed doors in both Eastern and Western Europe, he had developed a reputation as a pragmatist, someone who didn't preach politics but understood how culture moved people and how football could move culture. The plan was simple, yet audacious. 1. Tudor would bring Juventus to Washington, creating a seemingly benign moment of global sports solidarity. 2. While the press focused on Trump's comments about Iran and Israel, Tudor's presence would signal something deeper to select observers, a readiness for cultural neutrality. 3. This signal would be interpreted by Middle Eastern intermediaries, not as a political statement, but as a window, a nonverbal message that both sides could exploit to initiate low-risk dialogue. In short, Juventus was a symbol, and Trump was the one flipping the switch. In the days that followed the Oval Office meeting, rumors began to swirl. A Qatari-owned sports agency suddenly announced a multi-country Peace Cup friendly tournament, with proposed matches in Tel Aviv, Doha, and Istanbul. Juventus was named the flagship participant. Simultaneously, an unnamed FIFA executive was quoted in a leaked memo stating, "If governments can't talk to each other, maybe their people can, through the clubs they love." The story exploded. Iranian state media first condemned the Oval Office stunt, calling it Western cultural intrusion, only to soften their language days later after Juventus was rumored to visit Tehran for a goodwill match. Israeli officials refused to comment, but increased diplomatic contact with Qatar by 18% in that same week. And then came the real shock. A leaked satellite image, verified by open-source analysts, showed a previously unknown meeting between representatives from both Iran and Israel, not in Switzerland, not in New York, but in a luxury suite at a Juventus match in Dubai. No formal statements were made, no agreements signed, but the presence alone shattered years of diplomatic stalemate. As the pressure mounted, Igor Tudor remained silent, until he didn't. In an exclusive interview with an Italian news outlet, he was asked directly, "Did you know Juventus was being used as a diplomatic tool?" His answer was careful, but revealing. "I knew that sometimes, the ball you pass on the field can go much farther than you expect. My job is to help it land in the right place." When pressed further, Tudor declined to confirm or deny involvement in any political strategy. But he did acknowledge one thing. The photo with Trump, taken during the Iran-Israel statement, was not spontaneous. It had been planned for weeks. That admission alone changed everything. It meant the Juventus photo wasn't just a backdrop. It was a message directed at the world, saying, "If these two can be in the same room, maybe anything is possible." The world responded in waves. FIFA, caught off guard, attempted to issue vague statements about protecting the neutrality of sport. But internal leaks showed that officials had known of Trump's interest in sports diplomacy months earlier. Some emails even suggested FIFA had greenlit Juventus's visit as part of an informal pilot program in cultural bridging. In Europe, political analysts debated the ethics of using sports teams for geopolitical signaling. In America, media split along partisan lines, some praising Trump for a genius soft power move, others accusing him of using football to mask backdoor diplomacy with adversarial regimes. But in the Middle East, something else was happening. Social media users across Iran and Israel began sharing the same image. Trump, Tudor, and the Juventus team lined up in the Oval Office, standing under a banner that read "Stronger Together." Online polls showed an unprecedented spike in favor of temporary cultural exchanges between the two nations, particularly among the youth. Even regime officials, according to internal dispatches, began floating the idea of non-binding cultural treaties, a concept once deemed laughable. And still, no missiles were fired. In the end, the real brilliance of Trump's move wasn't the press conference. It wasn't the photo op. It wasn't even the whispered meetings behind closed doors. It was the absence of explanation. By never declaring what the Juventus visit meant, Trump left the world guessing, and that uncertainty became the signal. It forced every government, every strategist, and every media outlet to fill in the blanks themselves. Some saw manipulation, others saw hope, many saw both. But no one could deny this. A football team stood beside a former president during a geopolitical crisis, and the next day, enemies were talking. That may have been a coincidence, or it may have been the most elaborate game of 4D chess in recent political history. Months later, at a quiet charity gala in Milan, Tudor was again asked about the Oval Office visit. He smiled, sipped his drink, and said only this: "Football is not the answer, but sometimes it's the only language we all still speak."